Hey everybody, Tony D with a hot take. And this one is a little different. As many of you may or may not know, I'm a big fan of watching Tim Pool. And I often mention that I saw something on his channel or whatever. And usually I get in on his news and do a take. But today I would like to respectfully disagree with Mr. Poole today. He's been pushing a line of civil war, and I don't totally disagree with that. I made my own predictions, my own wacky screenwritery predictions about the Civil War. I don't think it's going to happen, and he made an interesting comment today about intersectional feminism and how it seems to be infiltrating society at every level, which is true. He did a report about the Army and their Department of Diversity and Inclusion and Equity, and they put out some wacky missive. And he compares intersectional feminism to a cult and to a religion, which it seems like. But here's the problem. Here's the reason why I don't see it taking over. It's too easy to game. It's very easy to game the system in the world of intersectional feminism. Here's how you do it. When you're attacked or set upon by intersectional people, you simply join one of their groups, and you're immune, right? So, if someone attacks you and you just say, well, I'm non-binary, or I'm asexual, or I'm trans, if you really want to go really far. I think in trans you got more to prove, but with the other two, I'm demisexual, whatever. You just throw out any of these buzz terms, you're in the group. So now you're in the hierarchy. Now they can't just dismiss you. Now they can't just say, well, you're a bigot. Well, even though they have turned around and called people bigots for being, they've called various African Americans bigots and white supremacists and whatnot. I mean, they'll smear anybody. But the problem is when you use their buzzwords against them, the whole thing kind of falls apart. So you could potentially see, I think what you're going to see in the future is this. This whole trend is going to die, but it will leave remnants of diversity and inclusion and training. Because what happens typically is when these trends die, there are remnants left behind that sort of linger. Let me think of a concrete example. So, for instance, if during the Satanic Panic, let's say, back in the 80s, if they had formed some sort of secret task force to investigate, extreme religions, I'm sure it still is somewhere. I'm sure the paperwork is somewhere, and they could always sort of pull it out of the file and turn the task force back on if they found some sort of extreme religion that they could use. What you'll see, I think, is you'll see this trend die, but as the trend dies, it's such a slow-moving train. You've got the momentum of all the other people who just got woke, right? So you may have, I guess I'd put it this way. The trendsetters in the United States tend to be on the coast, right? You got LA, you got New York. Then after that, maybe you hit Chicago, all the major cities, and some other coast, maybe Texas, whatever's cool. And then it slowly permeates out into like the Midwest in the middle of nowhere. So this trend is slowly doing that, but as it permeates out into the middle of nowhere, people out in the middle of nowhere are like, what the hell is this? because it's not really a good trend for them. It only works in like very urban settings. Anything outside the urban setting, the woke stuff kind of starts to fall apart. So I think that's what we're seeing. That's why Antifa and all the Marxist nonsense, it's all happening in the major cities. It's not really happening in the suburbs. They kind of tried to go there, but they're met with resistance the moment they go there. And yeah, I know that couple sort of backed off their statement and blah, 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 but there's still a resistance, that there's any resistance at all. But when this dies and goes away, the kids who were into it, they don't do it anymore. It's just, that's boring now. I'm into something else. And it's not because the government cracked down on Antifa, although that's a small portion of it. It's just because it's not cool anymore. Too many people are doing it. Once too many people do something, nobody wants to do it anymore. It becomes old hat. And that's rapidly approaching. It's rapidly approaching. So what you'll see is companies that aren't like super on the edge, that maybe are smaller, will still be doing diversity inclusion long after the trend is dead. And maybe somebody in the company has some advantage by doing that, but mostly it'll just be institutional momentum at that point. And until maybe they'll pass some law that'll allow people to sue for discrimination regardless of race or gender or whatever. You'll have a situation like where you end up driving out straight white males, and they end up suing the company because you drove them all out, trying to be overly inclusive. I think that's the more likely scenario, even if Biden wins, which I don't think he will. I think it's going to be a landslide for Trump, because as people see more and more of this nonsense, they just are horrified by it. They don't want it in their town. They don't want Antifa coming to their town. They don't want people to defund the police. They don't want, intersectional feminism telling them how to live or think, or that, well, you're a white person, you have to read White Fragility now and then confess all your white sins. People aren't going to stand for that. They're not going to do it. Now, they may put up with it at work, but you know what it's like to be at work. You'll say anything. There's a new policy now, says we all have to hate eggs, so I'll just go around the room. Do you hate eggs? Oh, yeah, I hate eggs. Yeah, how about you? You hate eggs? Yeah. Everybody here hate eggs? Yeah. All right, then, let's get back to work. That's the extent of the belief in that system. There'll be people who will just go through the motions. So it won't mean anything. It'll just be an annoying thing that you have to say or do in order to keep your job or keep your position or whatever. It's when people make you do stuff that, you'll just do it half-assed, or you won't do it at all, because it's work. And if you get stuck in that position, people will tell you, oh yeah, just say you're non-binary, and then say you don't want to do it. See, when you use their own rules against them, they have this is why the Chaz failed, right? The Chaz failed because it couldn't have possibly succeed. There were no rules, so order broke down almost immediately, and everything just fell apart. So what do you think will happen if you actually impose all this leftist nonsense? Everything will fall apart. You'll be dependent upon the handful of responsible people who, in your job, will become, they'll become the real power brokers. And if they don't want to adhere to your wacky rules, or if they only mouth them and say, don't press this on everybody else, you'll have no choice but to do that. Because you won't have anybody else to be able to run anything. You can have this wacky Office of Inclusion and Equity or whatever, but they don't actually do anything other than bother people all day. And when you bother people in a private company to the point at which they don't get their work done and no money is being made, that's when the bosses show up and go, what the F are you doing? Why aren't we making any money? Oh, the Office of Inclusion? Don't bother these people ever again. And it just goes away. Now, it may not happen in the Army because it's not a private entity or whatever. It's not profit driven. But it'll happen everywhere else eventually, even at Disney. Yeah, even at Disney. When Disney is done losing money, when they lose enough money, all this woke stuff goes right out the window. Well, they won't think about it twice. It'll leave, and so will all the people connected to it. And it's kind of what Tim described in terms of the activism, how they would fire all the activists in a department or in a nonprofit because they didn't want to demoralize new activists coming in. So they would fire everybody in order to start with a fresh slate. They kind of already do that in the movie industry anyway. So when the new guy comes in, his first instinct is to fire everybody and bring in all his own people because they'll be all super motivated because they'll be his guys. So I think we're going to see a lot of that. And the people who are going to get fired are all these woke-tards. I mean, they're just going to get fired because who the hell wants to put up with them? It's just too much trouble after a while. You can only destroy so much before people go, no. Yeah, but you're not being inclusive and diverse. I'm non-binary. Well, that doesn't sound true. Are you really? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. I already said it. So I am. By your own rules, I can be non-binary. I could decide right now to be non-binary, right? Well, yeah, but okay. Now I'm in the group. Go away. What are they going to do? By their own rules. It's just going to take a while for people to catch on to these rules. Once they do, they'll game the system back.